The champagne foam was still wet on Vespera's knuckles, a stinging reminder of the moment her life imploded behind the wine display. Across the room, her ex, Lysander, was already trying to weave a web of lies to save his reputation. Vespera didn't wait for an apology. She turned to the man who smelled of cedar, leather, and old money, the man the rest of the room was backing away from. "Can you kiss me?" she whispered, her hand trembling against his Tom Ford suit. "I want to make my ex jealous." She didn't see the dark amusement in Valerius's eyes, or notice the silent men in suits positioning themselves at the exits. The kiss lasted exactly 7 seconds. Vespera knew because she counted them, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Valerius's mouth was warm and deliberate, his hand at the small of her back possessing rather than supporting. When he finally pulled away, the room had gone silent in a way that made her skin prickle. She turned back toward Lysander, expecting to see rage or jealousy or anything that would make this humiliation worth it. Instead, she found something worse: terror. His face had gone the color of spoiled milk, and he was backing away slowly, like someone had just pulled a gun. The investors he'd been courting earlier were suddenly very interested in the hors d'oeuvres. The Russian ambassador's security detail had their hands inside their jackets. Even Xantha had stopped smirking, her eyes wide as she grabbed Lysander's arm and hissed something Vespera couldn't hear. "You should go," Valerius said quietly, his breath still warm against her ear. "Your ex-fiancé looks like he might faint, and I'd prefer not to have that sort of scene at an event I'm funding." Vespera's brain snagged on the last part. "You're funding this?" "The Ascendant Foundation belongs to one of my holding companies. Did you think they let just anyone rent the Elysian Ballroom?" His hand was still on her back, a brand through the silk of her dress. "You curate an excellent wine program, Miss Caldwell." The 2015 Screaming Eagle was a particularly inspired choice. He knew her name. He knew her wine selections. And he was touching her like he owned her. Vespera stepped back, her professional instincts finally overriding her rage. "Thank you for helping me. I should get back to work." "Should you?" Valerius tilted his head, studying her the way she studied a vintage before authentication. "I think your evening just became significantly more complicated." Before she could ask what he meant, her assistant Paolo appeared at her elbow, his usually warm face now ashen. "Vespera, we need to talk. Now." She let him pull her toward the service corridor, aware of Valerius's eyes tracking her movement across the room. The moment they were out of sight, Paolo grabbed her shoulders. "Tell me you didn't just kiss Valerius Constantine." The name meant nothing to her. The man in the Tom Ford suit? He seemed like what? A nice guy. Paolo's voice climbed an octave. "Vespera, he's not even supposed to be on the guest list. His donations get accepted, but he doesn't attend. Ever. The fact that he's here tonight means someone very important is either about to get very rich or very dead." Vespera's mouth went dry. "Who is he?" Paolo stared at her like she'd just asked who the president was. "You really don't know? Christ, you really don't." He pulled out his phone, typed something, then showed her the screen. The article was from the Financial Times, dated 3 months ago. The headline read, "Constantine Empire Expands. Eastern European Syndicate now controls 40% of port operations." The photo showed Valerius at some charity function, unsmiling, with a caption that used words like alleged and organized crime and untouchable. Her stomach dropped. That can't be right. "He just helped me make my ex jealous." He was what? Charming? "Vespera, men like Valerius Constantine don't do favors for strangers. They make investments." Paolo grabbed her hand, his palm clammy. "And you just became a very public one." The service door burst open. 2 men in dark suits stepped through, and Vespera recognized them from the ballroom. They'd been standing near the exits when Valerius kissed her. They hadn't been admiring the architecture. "Miss Caldwell," the taller one said, his accent thick and Eastern European. Mr. Constantine requests your presence in the Rose Salon. Please come with us. It wasn't a request. Paolo's grip on her hand tightened. She's working. Tell your boss to make an appointment like everyone else. The shorter guard smiled, but it was the kind of smile that preceded violence. Mr. Constantine doesn't make appointments, my friend. He makes suggestions. Miss Caldwell is wise enough to understand the difference, yes. Vespera's mind raced. She could refuse, could make a scene, could call security, except Valerius apparently owned the foundation that hired security. She could run, but to where? Her apartment was in his name on some shell company deed? Her car was parked in a garage he probably controlled? Stop. You're spiraling. He's just a wealthy donor who helped you embarrass Lysander. This is fine. Except it wasn't fine. Nothing about the way people had reacted to that kiss was fine. I'll go, she heard herself say. Paolo, finish the service without me. The screaming eagle needs to breathe another 20 minutes before the toast. Vespera. I'll be fine. She squeezed his hand once, then let go before she could change her mind. The Rose Salon was on the 3rd floor, accessible only by a private elevator that required a key card. The guards flanked her in silence, their presence somehow both protective and threatening. When the doors opened, she found herself in a room that looked like it had been decorated by someone with unlimited funds and absolutely no interest in subtlety. Everything was either gold, marble, or silk. Valerius stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city skyline with a glass of red wine in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. The 2009 Sassicaia, he said. I took the liberty. I hope you don't mind. That bottle was worth $8,000. He was drinking it like it was boxed wine. Why am I here? Vespera kept her voice steady, professional. This was just another difficult client. She'd handled Russian oligarchs and Saudi princes. She could handle whatever this was. Because you asked me to kiss you in front of 300 witnesses, including 2 rival organizations who now believe you're under my protection. Valerius finally turned, and his expression was unreadable. Did you know your ex-fiancé owes money to the Volkov Bratva? Quite a lot of money, actually. Gambling debts are so pedestrian. Ice flooded Vespera's veins. Lysander doesn't gamble. Lysander does many things you don't know about. The vineyard in Tuscany? The one you've been planning together? He already sold the land rights to cover his losses. You were never going to Italy, Miss Caldwell. You were going to be discarded the moment he found a way to liquidate your shared assets without raising suspicion. The room tilted. Vespera reached for the back of a chair, her knees suddenly unreliable. Valerius crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, steadying her with one hand. Careful. That's a Versace original you're about to ruin. You're lying, she whispered. He wouldn't. I don't lie. I don't need to. He guided her into the chair, then crouched in front of her so they were eye level. Your sister knew, incidentally. She's been helping him siphon funds for 6 months. The affair was just insurance. If you discovered the missing money, he could frame it as a crime of passion rather than calculated theft. Vespera's vision blurred. Everything she'd built, everyone she'd trusted, it was all rotting from the inside. Why are you telling me this? Valerius smiled that dangerous smile again. Because, cara mia, you just made yourself my problem. And I take very good care of my problems. Vespera didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment, the converted loft in the Pearl District that suddenly felt like a cage, staring at her laptop screen. Every search result about Valerius Constantine made her stomach churn harder. Alleged ties to Eastern European organized crime. Suspected money laundering through legitimate businesses. 3 federal investigations, 0 convictions. Known associates found dead in remarkably creative ways. The wine she'd poured sat untouched on the coffee table, oxidizing. She'd spent her entire adult life learning to appreciate the perfect vintage, the ideal pairing, the subtle notes that separated excellence from mediocrity. Now all she could taste was ash. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The Rosewood Hotel. Suite 3000. 10 a.m. Come alone. She didn't need to ask who it was from. The Rosewood was the kind of place that catered to people who considered five-star hotels beneath them. The lobbies smelled like money and intimidation, all marble and fresh orchids, and staff who looked at Vespera like they could calculate her net worth by her shoes. She took the private elevator to the 30th floor, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman who looked far more composed than she felt. The suite door was already open. Valerius sat at a dining table positioned by floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning light turning his dark hair almost blue-black. He was reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, and drinking espresso from a cup that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He'd traded the Tom Ford suit for something more casual, black trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they'd done more than sign checks. "You're punctual," he said without looking up. "I appreciate that." Vespera stayed near the door, her purse clutched like a shield. "What do you want?" "Sit down, Miss Caldwell. We have business to discuss, and I prefer not to shout across rooms." He finally glanced up, and those dark eyes pinned her in place. "Unless you'd rather I come to you?" She sat. The chair was obscenely comfortable. Valerius folded his newspaper with precise movements and set it aside. "How much do you know about the Volkov Bratva?" "Only what you told me last night. That Lysander owes them money. $378,000, to be exact. Accumulated over 18 months through various underground poker games and sports betting." He poured her an espresso without asking if she wanted one. The Volkovs are not patient creditors. They were planning to collect their debt this week through rather unpleasant means. Vespera's hand shook as she reached for the cup. "What kind of means?" "The kind that would have involved you signing over your share of the business, your apartment, and possibly parts of your anatomy." He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Lysander was going to offer you as collateral. Your sister helped him forge the paperwork." The espresso was perfect, rich and dark with just a hint of chocolate. She hated that she noticed. "And you know this how?" "Because I own the Volkovs." Valerius leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Or rather, they operate in my territory with my permission. When they briefed me on their collection plans yesterday morning, imagine my surprise when your name appeared in the file." The room seemed to tilt. "Yesterday morning?" "Before the gala." "Before the gala." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I attended specifically to see the woman foolish enough to entangle herself with a man stupid enough to steal from me by proxy." "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. That's what made you interesting." He stood, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a predator. "And then you approached me. Asked me to kiss you. Do you understand what that looked like to everyone watching?" Vespera's throat tightened. "Like I was with you. Like you were mine." He turned, and the morning light behind him made him look almost ethereal, like something beautiful and terrible. "In my world, Miss Caldwell, public displays of possession have meaning. When I kiss a woman in front of my rivals, I'm making a statement. I'm drawing a line. I'm saying she belongs to me, and anyone who touches her answers to me. But I didn't know that. It was just a moment of impulse? A way to hurt your ex-fiancé." Valerius crossed back to the table, bracing his hands on the surface and leaning toward her. "It doesn't matter what you intended. What matters is what they saw." And what they saw was Valerius Constantine claiming a woman publicly for the first time in 5 years. The weight of his presence was suffocating. Vespera forced herself to meet his eyes. "So what happens now? You're here to threaten me? To make me disappear? If I wanted you to disappear, you'd already be gone." He straightened, returning to his chair with unsettling calm. "No, Miss Caldwell. I'm here to explain the terms of our arrangement." "We don't have an arrangement." "We do. You created it the moment your lips touched mine." He picked up a folder from the table, sliding it across to her. "Your ex-fiancé's debt has been transferred to my personal accounts. The Volkovs no longer have any claim on him or you. The paperwork your sister forged has been destroyed. Your assets are secure. Vespera opened the folder with trembling fingers. Documents, financial statements, legal transfers, all bearing yesterday's date. Why would you do this? Because you're mine now, whether you intended it or not. And I protect what's mine. He sipped his espresso, watching her over the rim. But protection, cara mia, comes with obligations. There it was. The trap closing. What kind of obligations? You'll continue your work as a sommelier. You'll attend events on my arm when I require it. You'll smile and play the role of the woman who chose me, not the woman who accidentally stumbled into my world. His voice was silk over steel. And most importantly, you'll convince everyone watching that our relationship is real. For how long? Until I decide otherwise. He set down his cup with a soft click. The alternative is that I withdraw my protection and let nature take its course. Lysander's debts become yours. The Volkovs collect. Your sister faces federal charges for fraud. Your career ends in spectacular fashion. Do you want me to continue? Vespera's hands fisted in her lap. This is insane. You can't just claim someone because they kissed you at a party. I didn't claim you because you kissed me. I claimed you because you gave me permission in front of witnesses who will kill you if they think I've lost interest. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You wanted to make your ex jealous. Congratulations. You succeeded. But you used the wrong weapon, and now you're learning that some weapons bite back. I'm not a weapon. I'm a person. You're a liability who became an asset the moment our lips touched. I'm offering you a chance to survive that transition with your dignity intact. His eyes held hers, dark and merciless. I've had your apartment swept for surveillance. There were 4 devices, 2 from the Volkovs, 2 from a journalist investigating my operations. I've assigned a security detail to your building. Your ex-fiancé received a visit this morning explaining the consequences of ever speaking to you again. These things have already been done, Miss Caldwell. You're already in my world. The only question is whether you accept it gracefully or resist until reality breaks you. Vespera stood on shaking legs. And if I refuse? If I go to the police? Valerius smiled. It was the saddest she'd seen him look. Then you'll discover that I own the police too. And the judges. And the journalists. And everyone else who might have helped you. He stood as well, closing the distance between them until she could smell cedar and smoke. I'm not the villain in this story, Kara. I'm the man who saved you from actual villains. The fact that I have my own price doesn't make me your enemy. It makes me your only option. He was right. God help her, he was right. When do I start? The words tasted like surrender. You already have. Valerius reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. Welcome to your new life, Miss Caldwell. I promise it will be anything but boring. Vespera was cataloging a shipment of Burgundy in the climate-controlled cellar beneath Marques's when her phone started buzzing. 12 missed calls from Lysander. 3 voicemails. A string of increasingly unhinged text messages that started with "we need to talk" and devolved into "you don't know what you've done." She deleted them without listening. The security detail Valerius had assigned, 2 men named Dmitri and Alexei who looked like they crushed walnuts with their bare hands for fun, stood at the cellar entrance. They'd been her shadow for 3 days now, silent and ever-present. She'd stopped trying to lose them after the first attempt ended with her trapped in a coffee shop bathroom while Dmitri politely explained through the door that Mr. Constantine would be displeased if she made their job difficult. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Paolo. Your ex is here. In the restaurant. He's causing a scene. Vespera's stomach dropped. She grabbed her tablet and headed for the stairs, Dmitri and Alexei falling into step behind her like well-trained shadows. The cellar stairs opened into the kitchen, where the sous chef was yelling about burned risotto and the pastry team was having a whispered argument over macarons. She pushed through the organized chaos into the dining room. Lysander stood near the host's stand, his hair disheveled and his tie askew. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, Eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled, the careful veneer of charm he usually wore completely stripped away. When he saw her, something feral crossed his face. "There she is," he announced loudly enough that half the lunch service turned to stare. "My fiancée. The woman who's been lying to everyone about us." Vespera felt Dimitri shift closer behind her, a wall of muscle and threat. "Lysander. Leave." "Leave? You ruined my life and you want me to leave?" He laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. "Do you know what your new boyfriend did? He bought out every single one of my investors. The Tuscany deal is dead. My restaurant financing fell through. My apartment lease was mysteriously terminated. I'm being systematically erased, Vespera, and it's because of you. It's because you're a thief and a liar." She kept her voice low, aware of the diners, pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. "You sold land that wasn't yours to sell. You used me as collateral for gambling debts. You fucked my sister in a room full of people I work with. This isn't my fault, it's consequences." Lysander closed the distance between them, and suddenly Alexei was there, one massive hand on his chest stopping him cold. The Russian's face was impassive, but there was something in his eyes that promised violence if Lysander moved another inch. "Don't touch me," Lysander hissed. "I'm talking to my fiancé." "Ex-fiancé," Vespera corrected. "We're done, Lysander. We were done the moment I found you with Xantha. Because of one mistake? One moment of weakness." His voice climbed higher, desperation bleeding through. "We had plans, Vespera. We were going to build something together. You can't just throw that away because some mobster decided you're his new toy." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the kitchen noise seemed muted. Vespera felt heat crawl up her neck, not from embarrassment, but from rage. "You made me collateral," she said quietly, each word precise and cutting. "You forged documents with my sister to steal everything I've worked for. Don't you dare frame this as romance gone wrong. This is crime. This is betrayal. And if Valerius Constantine hadn't intervened, I'd be signing away my life to pay for your stupidity." Lysander's face contorted. "He's lying to you. Whatever he told you, it's manipulation. I have the paperwork." Vespera pulled out her phone, brought up the scanned documents Valerius had provided. "Your signature. Xantha's notary seal. My forged initials. Should I read the part where you valued my share of our business at half its worth, or the section where you offered my apartment as secondary collateral?" He went pale. "You weren't supposed to see that. Those were just insurance. In case the Tuscany deal fell through, You needed to rob me to cover your gambling debts." She felt something crystallize inside her, all the confusion and hurt of the past few days hardening into clarity. "Get out, Lysander. If I see you again, I'll let my security detail handle it however they see fit." Dimitri smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Lysander's eyes darted between the two Russians, then back to Vespera. "You think you're safe with him? Valerius Constantine is a monster. Everyone in this city knows it. He doesn't love you, he doesn't love anyone. You're just a game piece to him, something to move around his board until you're no longer useful." "And what were you?" Vespera asked softly. "What was I to you, Lysander? Besides a bank account and a reputation you could exploit." He flinched like she'd slapped him. The restaurant's front door opened, and Vespera felt the temperature drop several degrees. Valerius walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire wine cellar, his expression pleasant and utterly terrifying. Two more security personnel materialized behind him, not Dimitri and Alexei, but men even larger and more menacing. "Mr. Thorne," Valerius said, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. "How unexpected to find you here." Lysander's bravado crumbled like week-old bread. "I was just leaving." "Were you?" Valerius approached with the unhurried pace of someone who knew prey couldn't escape. "Because it sounded very much like you were harassing Miss Caldwell. And we had such a productive conversation 3 days ago about how that would be inadvisable. I just wanted to talk to her. To explain." To explain how you forged her signature on federal documents? To explain how you colluded with her sister to commit fraud? To explain how you planned to hand her over to the Volkov Bratva like a sacrificial lamb? Valerius stopped directly in front of Lysander, close enough that the height difference was pronounced. Please do explain. I'm fascinated. Lysander's Adam's apple bobbed. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? Valerius tilted his head, and Vespera recognized the expression now. It was the look of someone playing with food before consuming it. Because from where I stand, you committed multiple felonies, destroyed the woman you claimed to love, and are now attempting to gaslight her in a public restaurant. Did I miss anything? She kissed you. She humiliated me in front of everyone. She kissed me after you had your tongue down her sister's throat. Valerius's voice went soft, which somehow made it more threatening. And even if she hadn't, your crimes preceded that moment by 18 months. You don't get to play victim when you're the architect of your own destruction. Lysander's hands clenched into fists. For one insane moment, Vespera thought he might actually try to throw a punch. Then Valerius's security detail shifted forward in perfect synchronization, and whatever suicidal impulse had gripped him evaporated. This isn't over, Lysander said, but his voice had lost its conviction. It is, actually. Valerius pulled out his phone, tapped something, then showed Lysander the screen. I just purchased the building where you're currently staying. Your belongings will be on the street in 2 hours. I also bought your mother's mortgage. She's safe, by the way, though I imagine she'll be disappointed to learn what kind of man her son became. And that restaurant group you were trying to join? I'm their primary investor now. Your application has been declined. The color drained from Lysander's face. You can't. I already have. Valerius pocketed his phone. You attempted to destroy Miss Caldwell's life to cover your inadequacies. Consider this a lesson in proportional response. Now leave before I decide to make this educational experience more permanent. Dmitri and Alexei moved as one, flanking Lysander and guiding him toward the exit. He tried to look back at Vespera one last time, but Alexei's hand on his shoulder kept him moving forward. The door closed behind them with a soft click. The restaurant remained frozen for 3 heartbeats. Then silverware clinked, conversations resumed, and the world spun on like nothing had happened. Valerius turned to Vespera, his expression softening fractionally. Are you all right? She realized she was shaking. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He reached out, his fingers brushing her wrist where her pulse hammered visibly. He threatened what's mine. There are always consequences for that. I'm not a possession. No, Valerius agreed, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. You're an investment. And I take very good care of my investments. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous courier who practically threw it at Dmitri and fled. Vespera was in her apartment reviewing tasting notes for an upcoming corporate event when the security guard brought it up, his expression unreadable. From Mr. Constantine, he said, setting it on her kitchen counter like it might explode. He said you should read it before your meeting this afternoon. She didn't remember scheduling a meeting. The envelope was heavy cream paper, expensive, and unmarked except for her name in bold black ink. Inside were 3 documents, a deed transfer, a bank statement, and a letter written in precise, slanted handwriting that she was starting to recognize as Valerius's. Miss Caldwell, I thought you deserved to see the full extent of Mr. Thorne's business acumen. The attached documents show the complete timeline of your shared vineyard investment. Pay particular attention to the dates. VK. Vespera spread the papers across her breakfast bar, her coffee growing cold as she read. The Tuscany vineyard, the dream she and Lysander had built over candlelit dinners and weekend planning sessions, had never been real. Or rather, it had been real for exactly 6 weeks before Lysander sold her shares without her knowledge. The deed transfer was dated 9 months ago. 9 months. She'd still been planning their engagement party when he'd liquidated her portion of the investment. The bank statement was worse. It showed a series of wire transfers from the vineyard sale, each one feeding into an account at the Venetian casino. $50,000. $75,000. $120,000. On and on until the entire sum, $340,000 of her money, her future, her stupid naive dreams, had been converted into chips and lost across green felt tables. The letter fell from her numb fingers. She'd scraped together her share of that investment over 4 years. Every freelance sommelier gig, every private tasting, every single weekend she'd worked while her friends were at brunch or on vacation. She'd eaten ramen and skipped vacations and worn the same 3 interview suits on rotation because the vineyard was supposed to be forever. There forever. And Lysander had gambled it away in less than 6 months. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Car is downstairs. Don't keep me waiting. Vespera looked down at herself. Yoga pants, an oversized sweater, no makeup. She looked like she'd been crying, which was accurate because apparently she had been. Hot, angry tears she hadn't noticed until they dripped onto the bank statement and smeared the ink. She changed in a fury, throwing on the first professional outfit she could find, a black sheath dress, and heels that made her tall enough to look people in the eye when she told them to go to hell. Dmitri handed her a tissue in the elevator without comment. The car was a black Mercedes with windows so dark she couldn't see inside. The driver opened her door without speaking, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Valerius sat in the back, scrolling through something on his phone, dressed in another suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Mafia-themed cologne advertisement. "You look upset," he observed without looking up. "You showed me that my ex-fiancé stole almost everything I owned and gambled it away while I was planning our wedding." Vespera's voice came out sharp enough to cut glass. "How should I look?" "Thrilled." "I expected anger." "I'm seeing devastation." He finally glanced at her, his dark eyes assessing. "Interesting. I'm so glad my emotional breakdown is interesting to you." "It's not a breakdown. It's clarity." He pocketed his phone, giving her his full attention. "You spent 3 years with a man who saw you as a resource to exploit. Now you know exactly what you were worth to him. That's not devastation, that's freedom." "Freedom?" Vespera laughed, the sound bitter. "I lost $300,000. I lost the vineyard. I lost the life I thought I was building. You lost an illusion." Valerius leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The vineyard was never yours, Miss Caldwell. Even if Lysander hadn't sold it, you would have discovered eventually that he'd put everything in his name. The mortgage, the business license, the vendor contracts, all his. You were going to be a glorified employee in your own dream." The words hit like physical blows. "How do you know that?" "Because I bought the property. Or rather, I bought it from the investment group Lysander sold it to after he lost your money." Valerius pulled out his phone again, swiped through several screens, then handed it to her. "I had my people review the original paperwork. Look at the signatures." She looked. Every document bore only Lysander's name. Every single one. The property deed, the business formation papers, the agricultural permits, nowhere did her name appear except as a consulting partner with no legal stake. "He never intended to make you an equal owner," Valerius said quietly. "He took your money, used your expertise, and kept you legally irrelevant. That's not a partnership. That's exploitation with expensive wine." Vespera stared at the phone screen until the words blurred. "Why are you showing me this? What do you want me to say? That you were right? That Lysander was worse than I thought? Congratulations, you've proven your point." "I don't need to prove points. I need you to understand what you're mourning." He took his phone back, their fingers brushing. "You're not crying over lost money or a stolen dream. You're crying because you loved someone who never existed. The man you thought you knew was a fiction. A performance. And now you have to grieve someone who was never real." The accuracy of it was brutal. Vespera pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself not to cry again in front of this man who seemed to see through her like she was made of glass. "Where are we going?" she asked, because it was easier than acknowledging he was right. "Tuscany." Her head snapped up. What? The vineyard. I acquired it 2 days ago. Valerius gestured to the driver who was heading toward the private aviation terminal. We're taking my plane. I thought you should see what your money almost bought before I decide what to do with the property. You're taking me to Italy. Right now. Without asking. I don't ask permission for things I've already decided. He shifted in his seat, that predatory grace making the car feel smaller. You have two choices, Miss Caldwell. You can spend the next 6 months dwelling on what Lysander stole from you, or you can come with me and see what you're going to build instead. I don't have the money to build anything. He took it all. He took your investment. He didn't take your expertise. Valerius smiled, and for once it almost looked genuine. I own a vineyard in Tuscany that I have no idea what to do with. You're a sommelier who knows more about wine than anyone I've ever met. This seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement. Vespera's heart was hammering. You want me to run the vineyard? I want you to own 49% of it. I'll retain controlling interest. I'm not a complete fool, but you'll have full operational control. Your name on the deed. Your decisions. Your dream, rebuilt without the parasites who tried to steal it. He leaned back, watching her process the offer. Of course, this means you'll be tied to me professionally as well as personally. Some might say that's too much entanglement. But then again, you're already in my world. Might as well get something out of it besides protection. Why would you do this? Because you earned it. Because Lysander stole it. Because I can. He shrugged, the movement elegant and dismissive. Pick whichever reason makes you feel better about accepting. The plane was visible now through the windshield, sleek and white with stairs already deployed. Vespera looked at the vineyard documents still clutched in her hand, then at Valerius, who watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. If I say yes, what do you get out of this? A functional investment property and a partner who understands the business. His smile sharpened. And the satisfaction of turning your ex-fiancée's theft into your empire. Revenge is always more satisfying when it's profitable. Vespera took a breath. Then another. Then she opened the car door before she could talk herself out of it. I want 51%, she said. If I'm rebuilding my dream, I want control. Valerius laughed, the sound rich and surprised. 50-50. And I'll throw in the villa on the property. It needs work, but it has good bones. Deal. She didn't see his smile as she climbed the plane stairs, the one that said he'd been planning to offer her 60% all along. Vespera was asleep when they came for her. She'd dozed off on the plane somewhere over the Atlantic, lulled by the hum of engines and the second glass of Barolo that Valerius had poured from his private collection. When she woke, her head was on his shoulder and his jacket was draped over her like a blanket. He was still awake, reading something on a tablet, his jaw tight in a way that suggested the content wasn't pleasant. We're landing in 20 minutes, he said without looking at her. You should buckle in. She straightened, disoriented and embarrassed. Sorry. I didn't mean to. You were exhausted. It happens. He handed her his phone, the screen showing a series of text messages. Read these while I deal with something. The messages were from someone named Mikhail, written in terse, efficient language that made her skin crawl. Target acquired. Waiting for green light. Civilian exposure minimal, but not zero. Advise. What is this? Vespera asked, though part of her already knew. Valerius took the phone back, typed something, then set it aside. The Volkov Bratva didn't take kindly to having their debt collection opportunity removed. They've been surveilling you for the past week, trying to determine if you're genuinely under my protection or if the kiss was theater. Surveilling me how? They followed you to work. Photographed you at the coffee shop near your apartment. Hacked your email and banking records. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. 2 days ago, they approached your landlord with an offer to buy your building. When that failed, they started looking into your family. Terror spiked through her chest. My family? I don't have. Your mother in Portland. Your aunt in Seattle. The cousin you haven't spoken to in 5 years who runs a bakery in Sacramento. Valerius's voice remained level, but something cold flickered in his eyes. They're very thorough when they want to be. Vespera's mouth went dry. What are you going to do? I already did it. He gestured to the phone. Mikhail just confirmed that the surveillance team has been redirected. The hacker who accessed your accounts is being persuaded to find employment in a different industry. And the Volkov lieutenant who suggested using your mother as leverage is learning that some suggestions have permanent consequences. She should have been horrified. Should have demanded he stop, should have insisted on going to the police, should have clung to the illusion that this could be handled through legal channels. Instead, she heard herself ask, how permanent? Valerius looked at her then, really looked at her, and something like approval crossed his face. Permanent enough that he'll never suggest it again. Not permanent enough that his family will grieve. I'm not a monster, Miss Caldwell. I'm simply effective. The plane touched down with barely a bump, the landing so smooth it felt rehearsed. They taxied to a private hangar where 3 black SUVs waited like patient predators. Dmitri emerged from the first vehicle, his expression grim. We have a problem, he said in Russian. Valerius replied in the same language, his tone sharp. Vespera caught only fragments, something about timing, something about witnesses, something about cleaning up Thorne's mess. Dmitri handed over a tablet and Valerius's jaw tightened as he read. What's wrong? Vespera asked. Your sister. Valerius passed her the tablet. She's been busy. The screen showed a series of social media posts from Xantha's accounts, each one more inflammatory than the last. Photos of Vespera and Valerius at the gala with captions like, when your sister steals a mobster and guess who's playing dangerous games? One post had been shared 40,000 times. Another had attracted the attention of 3 different gossip blogs. But the worst one was a video. Xantha, perfectly lit and perfectly made up, speaking directly to the camera. My sister Vespera has always been ambitious, but I never thought she'd stoop to this. She's involved with Valerius Constantine, yes, that Valerius Constantine, and she's putting our entire family at risk. If something happens to me, if I disappear or have an accident, you'll know who to blame. Vespera felt sick. She's trying to make it look like you're threatening her. She's trying to create insurance. Valerius took the tablet back. If she frames herself as a victim publicly, she thinks I can't touch her without proving her point. It's clever in a desperate sort of way. Can you? Touch her, I mean. I can do many things. The question is which approach best serves your interests. He handed the tablet to Dmitri, then turned to Vespera. She's your sister. How do you want this handled? The question caught her off guard. She'd expected Valerius to simply act, to make decisions without consultation the way he seemed to do with everything else. Instead, he was waiting, giving her control over something she wasn't sure she wanted control of. I don't want her hurt, Vespera heard herself say. But I want her to stop. Those 2 goals are not mutually exclusive. Valerius pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked almost satisfied. Your sister has been living beyond her means for the past year. Credit card debt, unpaid rent, a car lease she can't afford. Lysander was subsidizing her lifestyle with your money. Now that funding source has dried up. So she's broke. She will be in approximately 48 hours when her creditors simultaneously demand payment. He scrolled through his phone, showing her a list of companies, all of which I either own or have significant influence over. She can declare bankruptcy. I'll make sure it's processed quickly, or she can accept the job offer that will arrive tomorrow morning. Vespera frowned. What job offer? A position at a vineyard in New Zealand. Remote location, excellent pay, 3-year contract with penalties for early termination. His smile was sharp. It's a real job with a real company. She'll learn the wine business from the ground up, starting with manual labor. By the time her contract expires, she'll either have developed an actual work ethic or she'll have learned that attention-seeking has consequences. You're exiling her. I'm offering her an opportunity to rebuild her life away from the drama she creates. Valerius pocketed his phone. The alternative is that I let her creditors handle collection in their usual manner, which involves lawsuits, garnished wages, and public humiliation. This way she gets a fresh start. She just has to earn it. It was ruthlessly elegant. Xantha would hate every moment of it, the isolation, the physical work, the inability to coast on looks and charm. But she'd survive. She might even grow. And the social media posts? Vespera asked. Already handled. Dmitri held up his phone, showing Xantha's accounts. Every inflammatory post had been deleted, replaced by a single message, taking a break from social media to focus on personal growth. Thanks for understanding. How did you? Her passwords were embarrassingly simple. Dmitri shrugged. The video is being scrubbed from gossip sites as we speak. Copyright claims, terms of service violations, the usual methods. By tomorrow morning, it will be as if it never existed. Vespera should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of what Valerius had just demonstrated. He could erase people, could rewrite their narratives, could control information with the same ease most people use to check the weather. And he was using that power to protect her. Thank you, she said quietly. Valerius's expression softened fractionally. I told you I protect what's mine. Your sister made herself a threat. I neutralized her. It's what I do. They drove through Tuscan countryside as the sun set, painting the hills in shades of amber and rose. The vineyard appeared like something from a dream, rows of vines stretching toward the horizon, a stone villa with weathered shutters, olive trees older than empires. Vespera's breath caught. This was what she'd imagined during all those planning sessions with Lysander. This was the future he'd stolen. It needs work, Valerius said, watching her reaction. The vines haven't been properly maintained in 2 years. The villa has structural issues. The previous owners let everything deteriorate. It's perfect, she whispered. He smiled then, genuine and almost warm. You see potential where others see ruin. That's why this will work. That night, as Vespera stood on the villa's terrace with a glass of local wine, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You'll regret choosing him over family. X. Before she could respond, the message deleted itself. A new text appeared, this time from Valerius. Her plane leaves at 6 a.m. The threat stopped now. Vespera looked across the terrace to where Valerius stood talking with Dmitri, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. He glanced over, met her eyes, and raised his own glass in a silent toast. She'd thought accepting his protection meant surrendering her power. Instead, she was learning that sometimes power came from knowing when to let someone dangerous stand between you and the world. She raised her glass in return. Xantha arrived at the vineyard 3 days before her scheduled flight to New Zealand. Vespera was in the wine cellar with the estate manager, a weathered Italian man named Giacomo who spoke in passionate tangents about soil composition and fermentation temperatures. She was learning that the previous owners had neglected basic maintenance. Barrels needed replacing, temperature controls were failing, and half the bottling equipment dated back to the 1980s. She was making lists, taking photos, losing herself in the familiar comfort of problem-solving. Then Dmitri appeared at the cellar entrance, his expression darker than usual. Your sister is here, he said in English, the words clipped. Mr. Constantine is handling it, but he thought you should know. Vespera's stomach dropped. How did she even find this place? She hired a private investigator. Not a very good one. We identified him within 6 hours. Dmitri's mouth twitched. He's been persuaded to find more ethical clients. She followed him up the stone steps into the blinding Tuscan sunlight. The villa's courtyard was filled with the sounds of construction, workers repairing the roof, masons fixing the crumbling fountain, landscapers clearing years of overgrowth. And in the middle of it all stood Xantha, looking absurdly out of place in designer heels and a white sundress that probably cost more than the workers' monthly salaries combined. Valerius stood 10 feet away from her, his posture relaxed, but his expression glacial. Two of his security team flanked him like bookends. Xantha was mid-sentence, her hands gesturing dramatically, her voice carrying across the courtyard. Completely unreasonable. I'm her sister. We had a fight, yes, but that's what sisters do. You can't just ship me off to the other side of the world because of one mistake. One mistake. Valerius's voice was soft, dangerous. Shall we review your mistakes chronologically, or would you prefer a thematic analysis? Xantha's perfect composure cracked slightly. I know you're angry about the social media posts, but I was upset. Vespera stole my fiancé. Lysander Thorne was never your fiancé. He was your sister's fiancé, who you seduced as part of a coordinated fraud scheme. Valerius took a single step forward, and Xantha instinctively retreated. You helped him forge documents. You enabled his theft. You betrayed your own blood for a man who is using you both. These aren't mistakes, Miss Caldwell. These are choices. He told me Vespera was controlling, that she was suffocating him, that he needed someone who understood him. Xantha's voice climbed higher, tinged with desperation. I was helping him escape a toxic relationship. You were helping him steal $300,000. Valerius said it flatly, without inflection. Everything else is narrative you constructed to avoid accepting what you are. Vespera emerged from the cellar entrance, and Xantha's attention snapped to her like a heat-seeking missile. Vespera. Finally. Tell him this is insane. Tell him I don't deserve to be exiled because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Vespera kept her voice level, though her hands trembled slightly. You fucked my fiancé. You helped him forge my signature. You tried to frame Valerius as a threat on social media. Which part is the misunderstanding? The part where you act like you're innocent. Xantha's mask slipped entirely, revealing the venom underneath. You've always been the perfect one. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect taste in wine. Do you know how exhausting it is to be your sister? To watch everyone fawn over you while I'm just the pretty one, the fun one, the one nobody takes seriously. So you decided to destroy my life? Vespera's voice cracked. That was your solution to feeling overlooked? I decided to take something you had for once. To see what it felt like to be you. Xantha's eyes glittered with tears that might have been real or might have been performance. But Lysander loved me. He chose me. And you can't stand that someone preferred me over perfect Vespera. He didn't love you. Valerius's voice cut through the sisterly dramatics like a scalpel. He used you to manipulate your sister. He told you whatever you needed to hear to gain your cooperation. When the Volkovs came to collect his debts, he was planning to offer you as payment too. Did he mention that part? Xantha went pale. That's not true. I have the documentation. Would you like to see it? Valerius pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness. He valued you at significantly less than your sister, by the way. Apparently your lack of professional skills made you a harder sell. The words hit Xantha like physical blows. Vespera watched her sister's face cycle through emotions, denial, realization, humiliation, and felt an unexpected pang of pity. Xantha had always been insecure, always comparing, always trying to prove she was worth more than surface beauty. And Lysander had exploited that perfectly. Why are you here, Xantha? Vespera asked quietly. What did you think would happen? I thought. Xantha's voice wavered. I thought if I apologized, if I explained, maybe you'd convince him to let me stay. Maybe we could work together. The vineyard is big enough for both of us. No. Valerius didn't raise his voice, but the word landed with finality. This vineyard is Vespera's. You have no place here. Then what am I supposed to do? Xantha's composure shattered completely. I have nothing. No money, no job, no prospects. You've destroyed my entire life. I've offered you a job with excellent pay and the opportunity to develop actual skills. Valerius's expression remained unmoved. The fact that it requires work and doesn't allow you to trade on your appearance or your sister's success is not my problem. It's in New Zealand. I don't know anyone there. Exactly. He smiled, cold and sharp. You'll be forced to build a life based on your own merits rather than other people's achievements or sympathies. It's called personal growth. I'm told it's quite transformative. Xantha turned to Vespera, desperation naked on her face. Please. I'm your sister. We're family. You can't just abandon me. Vespera looked at this woman who shared her blood and nothing else. This woman who had betrayed her without hesitation, who had helped destroy her dreams, who was now demanding forgiveness without offering genuine remorse. She thought about all the times she'd made excuses for Xantha's behavior, all the times she'd smoothed over conflicts to keep peace, all the years she'd been the responsible one so Xantha could be the free spirit. You abandoned me first, Vespera said. When you slept with my fiancé. When you helped him steal from me. When you tried to make me look like the villain for escaping a situation you created. She took a breath, steadying herself. I'm not abandoning you now. I'm letting you face the consequences of your choices. Take the job. Learn what it means to earn something instead of taking it. Maybe in 3 years we can have this conversation again. 3 years. Xantha's voice broke. You expect me to spend 3 years in exile for one mistake? You keep calling it one mistake. Valerius's patience had clearly expired. It was dozens of calculated decisions over 6 months. The job offer expires in 24 hours. After that, I withdraw my protection and let your creditors proceed with legal action. Your choice. This isn't a choice. This is blackmail. This is mercy. Valerius gestured to the security team. Dimitri will drive you back to the airport. First-class ticket to Auckland, 3 months advance salary deposited in an account I've opened for you, and a contract that includes housing and benefits. You can accept it gracefully or you can fight it, but the outcome is the same. Xantha looked between them, her expression cycling through rage and desperation, and something that might have been genuine fear. I hate you, she said to Vespera. I hate that you win. You always win. I didn't win anything. Vespera's throat tightened. I lost my fiancé, my business investment, and my sister. The fact that I'm rebuilding doesn't mean I won. It means I survived. Dimitri stepped forward, his presence making it clear the conversation was over. Xantha shot one last venomous look at Valerius, then allowed herself to be escorted toward the waiting car. She didn't look back. The courtyard fell silent except for the sounds of construction resuming. Workers who had paused to watch the drama returned to their tasks with practiced disinterest. Vespera stood frozen, processing what had just happened. You didn't have to be that harsh, she finally said. Yes, I did. Valerius moved to stand beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. She came here to manipulate you. To use your guilt and your family obligations to worm her way back into your life. If I'd shown even a fraction of sympathy, she would have interpreted it as weakness and returned with more elaborate schemes. She's still my sister. She's a person who shares your DNA and has spent her entire life resenting you for being competent. He said it without judgment, just stating facts. Family isn't an excuse for betrayal, Miss Caldwell. And forgiveness without accountability isn't mercy, it's enabling. Vespera watched the car disappear down the winding driveway, dust rising in its wake. Part of her wanted to call Xantha back, to try one more time to reach whatever good might exist underneath the jealousy and spite. But she knew Valerius was right. Xantha hadn't come here to apologize. She'd come here to avoid consequences. Will she actually take the job? Vespera asked. She'll take it. The alternative is far less pleasant. Valerius pulled out his phone, checked something, then nodded with satisfaction. She's already accepted the contract. Digitally signed it in the car. Apparently, survival instinct overrides pride. You had the contract ready before she even arrived. I have contingencies for all probable scenarios. He pocketed his phone. Come. Giacomo wants your opinion on whether to replace the fermentation tanks or restore them. This is infinitely more interesting than your sister's dramatics. Vespera followed him back toward the cellar, but she paused at the entrance. Valerius. He turned, one eyebrow raised in question. Thank you for not letting me make excuses for her. Something shifted in his expression, not quite softness, but close. You're welcome, cara mia. Now come tell me if we need new tanks or if Giacomo is simply fond of complaining. As she descended into the cool darkness of the cellar, Vespera realized that for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't carrying the weight of her sister's mistakes. Xantha was gone, on a plane to a new continent, finally forced to build something on her own. And Vespera was standing in a Tuscan vineyard with a dangerous man who somehow understood that the cruelest kindness was refusing to let people hide from themselves. The package arrived 6 weeks into Vespera's Tuscan residency, delivered by courier to the villa's newly restored entrance. She'd been tasting samples from the 2023 harvest with Giacomo, trying to determine which barrels were worth saving and which needed to be dumped. Her palate was exhausted, her notes were getting sloppy, and she was considering calling it a day when Dimitri appeared with a wooden box the size of a briefcase. From Mr. Constantine, he said, setting it on the tasting table. He said you should open it alone. Giacomo took the hint, gathering his samples and retreating to the fermentation room with a knowing smile. Dimitri followed, leaving Vespera alone with the box and her curiosity. The wood was dark walnut, polished to a mirror shine, with brass hinges and a small brass plaque engraved with her initials. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were keys. Dozens of them, each labeled with a small tag in Valerius's precise handwriting. Thorn Residence, Park Avenue Penthouse. Thorn Consulting LLC, Office Suite, 5th Avenue. The Merchant, Restaurant Property Deed. Bella Vita Imports, Wine Distribution Company. Thorn Family Estate, Connecticut. 2024 Porsche 911, VIN enclosed. The list went on and on. Each key represented something Lysander had owned, built, or inherited. Each tag included documentation, deeds, titles, incorporation papers, all freshly transferred into her name. At the bottom of the box was a letter, the paper heavy and cream-colored. Miss Caldwell. Attached you'll find the complete dismantling of Lysander Thorn's life. Every asset, every property, every business venture he ever touched now belongs to you. I've taken the liberty of having my legal team ensure all transfers are absolutely legitimate and tax-compliant. The last thing you need is an IRS investigation. The penthouse is already listed with a broker. Early estimates suggest it will sell for $4.2 million. The restaurant property is more complicated. It's underwater, as you probably suspected. I recommend liquidating it unless you have a sentimental attachment to losing money. The wine distribution company is actually profitable if poorly managed. It could be integrated into the vineyard's operations or sold for approximately $800K. Your choice. The Porsche is yours to keep or sell. I'm told it's very fast and utterly impractical, much like its former owner. The Connecticut estate is where things get interesting. It's been in the Thorn family for 3 generations. Lysander's mother still lives there. I've structured the transfer so that she retains lifetime residence rights, but you own the property. She'll never be homeless, but she'll spend the rest of her life knowing her son's failures cost them their legacy. Consider this a gift, or a revenge, or justice. The semantics are less important than the outcome. VK. P.S. I'll be arriving tomorrow evening. We have business to discuss. Vespera read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking harder with each pass. Valerius hadn't just destroyed Lysander, he'd systematically erased him, then handed her the spoils like a cat delivering a dead bird to its owner. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like vertigo. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the documentation. Every transfer was immaculate, every signature properly notarized, every tax implication carefully managed. Valerius's legal team had turned hostile takeover into an art form. By evening, she was sitting on the villa's terrace with a bottle of Brunello, trying to process the fact that she now owned more of Lysander's life than he ever had. The sunset painted the vineyard in shades of copper and gold, beautiful and surreal. "You're drinking alone." Valerius's voice came from behind her. "That's either celebration or crisis." She turned to find him standing in the terrace doorway, dressed casually in dark jeans and a black shirt, looking less like a crime lord and more like someone who'd just stepped off a yacht. He was a day early. "I thought you were arriving tomorrow." "I finished my business in Milan ahead of schedule." He crossed to the table, examining the bottle. "The 2018. Good choice." "May I?" She nodded, and he poured himself a glass with the easy familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He settled into the chair across from her, long legs stretched out, utterly relaxed. "You got my package," he observed. "I got your hostile takeover disguised as a gift basket." Vespera took a long drink. "Did you leave him anything? A toothbrush? A bank account with $17. He has a storage unit in Queens with some furniture and about $6,000 in a checking account I didn't find worth the effort to seize." Valerius swirled his wine, watching the light play through it. "I'm not cruel enough to leave him completely destitute. Just cruel enough to make sure he understands the cost of his choices. His mother still lives in the Connecticut house." "I'm aware. I structured it specifically to protect her while ensuring Lysander knows he cost his family their legacy." He met her eyes over the rim of his glass. "She's innocent in this." "He's not. The punishment should reflect that distinction." Vespera set down her glass before she could throw it. "Why? Why do all of this? You already protected me. You already neutralized the threats. Why go to this extreme?" "Because half measures breed resentment." Valerius leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "If I'd left Lysander with resources, he would have rebuilt. He would have schemed and plotted and eventually convinced himself he could come after you again. Men like him don't learn from minor setbacks. They need to be broken completely. And giving me his assets? That was necessary too. That was justice." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "He stole $300,000 from you. The combined value of what I've transferred to your name is approximately $6 million. Call it interest." The number made her dizzy. "I don't want $6 million that came from destroying someone's life." "Then donate it. Sell everything and give the proceeds to charity. Start a foundation for victims of financial fraud." Valerius shrugged. "Or keep it and use it to build the best vineyard in Tuscany. The money doesn't care about your moral complications, Miss Caldwell. It simply exists." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Lysander tried to destroy you. He failed. Now he's destroyed instead. That's not complicated, that's cause and effect." He finished his wine, set down the glass. "You keep trying to find the moral ambiguity in this. There isn't any. He's a predator who targeted you. I'm a bigger predator who eliminated the threat. The fact that you benefited financially is just efficient resource allocation." Vespera laughed, the sound brittle. "Efficient resource allocation. Is that what we're calling revenge now?" "I'm calling it what it is." Valerius stood, moving to the terrace railing to look out over the vineyard. "You want me to pretend this was altruism? That I dismantled your ex-fiancé's life purely out of the goodness of my heart? I'm not that person, Kara. I did this because he threatened what's mine, and because completely destroying one's enemies is more effective than leaving them wounded and resentful. I'm not yours. Aren't you?" He turned, backlit by the fading sunset. "You're wearing a dress I bought because all your clothes are still in storage in New York. You're living in a villa I own, working on a vineyard we're partners in, protected by my security team. Your sister is in New Zealand because I sent her there. Your ex-fiancé is financially ruined because I decided it should be so. At what point do you stop pretending you're not mine?" The words should have infuriated her. Instead, they settled over her like inevitability. He was right. Somewhere between the kiss at the gala and this moment on the terrace, she'd stopped being her own person and started being his, what? Possession? Partner? Project? I don't know what we are, she said quietly. We're two people who chose each other in a moment of impulse and are now dealing with the consequences. Valerius returned to the table, refilling both their glasses. The difference is that I'm comfortable with those consequences and you're still trying to apply moral frameworks that don't fit our situation. What situation is that? The one where you belong to a man who destroys your enemies and expects nothing in return except your presence. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Welcome to your new life, Miss Caldwell. It comes with a vineyard, several $1 million in liberated assets, and the undying enmity of anyone foolish enough to threaten you. Try not to overthink it. Vespera clinked her glass against his, the sound clear and final. What am I supposed to do with all of it? The properties, the businesses, the money. Whatever you want. It's yours. He smiled, sharp and satisfied. Though I'd recommend keeping the wine distribution company. It would pair well with the vineyard's expansion plans. What expansion plans? The ones we're going to discuss over dinner. Valerius checked his watch. I've had food brought in from that place in Florence you liked. The one with the wild boar ragu. We have approximately 30 minutes before it arrives, which gives you just enough time to accept that you're now a multimillionaire with a vendetta portfolio and a very dangerous partner. Is that what you are? My partner. Among other things. He stood, offering his hand. Come. Let's discuss how to turn your ex-fiancé's ashes into your empire. I find that kind of transformation infinitely satisfying. Vespera took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. The keys to Lysander's life sat in their velvet-lined box on the table, glinting in the twilight. Tomorrow she'd figure out what to do with them. Tonight, she'd let herself feel the savage satisfaction of winning. The Porsche, she said as they walked inside. I'm keeping the Porsche. Valerius laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I thought you might. It's parked in the garage. I had it delivered this morning. Presumptuous. Accurate. He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. You're a woman who just inherited her enemy's sports car. Of course you're keeping it. It's the most honest revenge there is. And standing in the villa's restored dining room, looking at the man who'd systematically destroyed her betrayer and gift-wrapped the remains, Vespera realized he was right. She was his. And he was hers. And together they were building something far more dangerous than either of them alone. The call came at 3 a.m. Vespera woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand, the screen casting harsh blue light across the villa's guest bedroom. She'd fallen asleep reviewing expansion proposals, her laptop still open beside her, spreadsheets glowing in the darkness. The number was unknown, but something made her answer. Vespera. Lysander's voice was raw, desperate. Thank God. I need your help. She sat up, instantly awake. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. Listen to me, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that ends with me dead if you don't help. His words tumbled over each other, panic bleeding through. I know I fucked up. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please, I'm begging you. Call off your psychotic boyfriend before he kills me. Valerius wouldn't, but even as she said it, she wasn't sure. Would he? She'd seen what he was capable of, how efficiently he dismantled threats. He would and he is. Lysander's breathing was ragged. He didn't just take my money, Vespera. He took everything. And now he's sent people to finish the job. I'm hiding in a motel in Newark. They're outside. I can see them through the window. Please. Vespera's heart hammered. Call the police. The police can't help me. You know that. He owns them. A crash in the background, muffled voices. Fuck. They're coming in. Vespera, please. Tell him you forgive me. Tell him to let me go. I'll disappear. I'll leave the country. You'll never hear from me again. Lysander. The line went dead. Vespera sat frozen for 3 seconds, then grabbed her robe and ran barefoot down the villa's hallway. Valerius's suite was at the far end, the door slightly ajar. She burst through without knocking. He was awake, sitting in an armchair by the window with a book and a glass of whiskey, looking like he'd been expecting her. He was shirtless, wearing only pajama pants, and the lamplight cast shadows across the scars that marked his torso. A roadmap of violence survived. "Lysander just called me," she said without preamble. "He said you sent people to kill him." Valerius set down his book with careful precision. "Did he? Is it true? What do you think?" He took a sip of whiskey, his expression unreadable. "Do you believe I would kill your ex-fiancé and not tell you?" "I don't know what to believe. You've done everything else without asking permission. I've done everything else to protect you or serve your interests." He stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace. "Killing Lysander Thorne serves neither purpose. He's already destroyed. Murdering him would only create complications." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. "Then who's after him?" "I imagine the Volkov Bratva is finally collecting on their own grievances." Valerius set his glass on the dresser. "When I took over his debt to me, I didn't assume his other obligations. The Volkovs have been remarkably patient, but patience has limits. You knew they'd come for him." "I knew it was probable." He said it without remorse. "He owes them money that has nothing to do with you. That's his problem to solve. He's going to die. Possibly." Valerius moved closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke. "Is that what you want? For me to intervene? To save the man who tried to destroy you?" Vespera's throat tightened. "I don't want anyone to die because of me. He's not dying because of you. He's dying because he made enemies and ran out of allies." His hand came up, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "You're conflating your compassion with responsibility. They're not the same thing. I can't just let him." "Yes, you can." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "You can walk away. Let nature take its course. Except that some people engineer their own destruction, and it's not your job to save them from themselves." Her phone buzzed again. Another call from the unknown number. She looked at it, then at Valerius. "Answer it," he said quietly. "But put it on speaker." She accepted the call, her hand shaking. "Lysander." "They're in the room." His voice was a terrified whisper. "Vespera, please. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Please." "He doesn't love you," Valerius said, loud enough for the phone to catch. "He loves that you might save him. There's a difference. Constantine." Lysander's voice turned venomous. "You sadistic fuck. This is murder. You're murdering me. I'm doing nothing. The Volkovs are simply collecting a debt." Valerius took the phone from Vespera's numb fingers. "You had options, Thorne. You could have worked out a payment plan. You could have offered collateral. Instead, you tried to use Vespera as a shield, and when that failed, you ran. This is the consequence of running. I'll give them anything. Sounds of a struggle, furniture breaking." Lysander's scream cut off abruptly. The line stayed open. Vespera could hear voices speaking Russian, calm and businesslike. Then a different voice came on, accented and coldly polite. "Mr. Constantine, the debt is settled. Should we dispose of the body, or would you like it delivered somewhere specific?" Vespera's stomach lurched. Valerius's expression didn't change. "Dispose of it," he said. "Cleanly. No evidence." "Understood. And the woman who witnessed this call is under my protection. She knows nothing. She was never involved." His eyes stayed locked on Vespera's. "Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir. Our apologies for the disruption." The call ended. Vespera stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. Lysander was dead. She'd heard him die. And Valerius had given orders about his body disposal like he was arranging dry cleaning. "You killed him," she whispered. "No. The Volkovs killed him. I simply chose not to intervene." Valerius set her phone aside. "And before you decide I'm a monster, understand that intervening would have meant paying his debt, which would have signaled that I consider him worth protecting, which would have put a target on your back for anyone who wants to use you as leverage against me. His death was the cleanest outcome for everyone except him. He called me for help and I listened while he died. He called you to manipulate you one final time. Valerius's voice gentled slightly. Everything he said, the fear, the love confession, the begging, it was calculated to make you feel guilty enough to intervene. Even facing death, he was trying to use you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've seen men beg for their lives hundreds of times. The ones who are genuine accept responsibility. The ones who are still scheming try to leverage relationships. He moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. He never apologized for what he did to you. He only apologized for getting caught. That tells you everything about whether his love was real. Vespera felt tears streaming down her face, hot and shameful. I should have done something. Like what? Bankrupt yourself paying his debts? Spent the rest of your life looking over your shoulder waiting for him to betray you again. Valerius pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. You did do something. You survived him. You rebuilt. You moved forward. His inability to do the same is not your failure. She stood there shaking, pressed against the warm solidity of him, trying to reconcile the man who was stroking her hair with the man who'd just coordinated a body disposal. These weren't two different people, they were the same person, and she was in too deep to pretend otherwise. I heard him die, she said into Valerius's chest. I know. I'll never forget that sound. I know. His arms tightened around her. But it will fade. And eventually you'll remember that he made every choice that led to that moment. You were just a witness. They stood like that for a long time, the villa silent around them except for the distant sound of night birds and wind through olive trees. Eventually Vespera's shaking subsided, leaving her hollowed out and exhausted. What happens now? She asked. Now you decide if you can live with this. Valerius pulled back enough to look at her, his dark eyes searching her face. If you can accept that being in my world means sometimes watching enemies fall without catching them. If you can't, I'll arrange for you to leave. The vineyard stays yours, the money stays yours, and I disappear from your life. But you have to decide tonight. It should have been an impossible choice. Stay with the man who'd orchestrated her ex-fiancé's destruction, or leave with her conscience intact. But Vespera was learning that conscience was more complicated than she'd thought. Lysander had tried to sell her to violent men to cover his debts, had stolen her dreams and her money, had betrayed her with her own sister, and when faced with consequences, had tried one final time to manipulate her into saving him. Valerius had protected her, had given her a future, had removed threats with ruthless efficiency, had never lied about what he was. I'm staying, she heard herself say. Something flickered in Valerius's expression, relief, maybe, or satisfaction. Are you certain? No. But I'm staying anyway. She looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd become her anchor. Does that make me a monster too? It makes you a survivor. He kissed her forehead, the gesture surprisingly tender. And survival is its own kind of morality. He led her back to her room, staying with her until the sun rose over the Tuscan hills, painting the vineyard in shades of gold. By the time morning came, Vespera had made peace with what she'd heard. Not because it was right, but because it was done. Lysander Thorne was gone. And she was still here, building something beautiful from the ashes he'd tried to leave her in. That would have to be enough. The grand opening of Caldwell Constantine Estate was scheduled for the first Saturday in October, timed perfectly with the Harvest Festival. Vespera had spent 3 months orchestrating every detail, the guest list that included Michelin-starred chefs and European royalty, the menu that showcased their first vintage, the string quartet positioned in the renovated courtyard where workers had once repaired crumbling fountains. She stood in the villa's master bedroom, her bedroom now, officially, though Valerius had been spending most nights there since Lysander's death, adjusting the emerald silk dress that had arrived from Milan that morning. It fit like it had been designed specifically for her body, which it had. Valerius didn't do off the rack. "You're nervous," he observed from the doorway. He was already dressed in a midnight blue suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a film about beautiful, dangerous men. His cufflinks were platinum, engraved with the intertwined initials of their estate. 200 people are about to judge 3 years of work based on a single glass of wine. Vespera fumbled with her earring, the clasp refusing to cooperate. "Of course I'm nervous." Valerius crossed the room in 3 strides, gently taking the earring from her trembling fingers. "Turn around." She obeyed, and his hands were steady as he fastened the diamond drop to her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck for a moment, warm and possessive. "The wine is exceptional," he said quietly. "Giacomo says it's the best Sangiovese he's tasted in a decade. The critics who've had advanced samples are already calling it a triumph. You have nothing to prove tonight except that you can accept success with the same grace you handled destruction. What if they only came because of you? Because they're afraid not to. Then they'll stay because of the wine. And return because of you." He turned her back around, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Stop looking for reasons to doubt yourself. You've earned this." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dimitri appeared, holding a tablet. "The first guests are arriving. And ma'am, there's someone at the service entrance asking for you. She says she's family." Vespera's stomach dropped. "Xantha." "No, ma'am." She gave her name as Elena Caldwell. Her mother. Vespera hadn't spoken to her in 8 months, not since the terse phone call where she'd explained that she was moving to Italy with a man her mother wouldn't approve of. Elena had responded with a lecture about reputation and recklessness that ended with Vespera hanging up mid-sentence. "Do you want me to handle it?" Valerius asked, his tone carefully neutral. "No. I'll talk to her." Vespera took a breath, steadying herself. "Give me 10 minutes, then send her to the library." Her mother looked older than Vespera remembered, her hair more gray than brown, her face lined with worry. She stood in the library examining the restored bookshelves like she was cataloging evidence of her daughter's sins. When Vespera entered, Elena turned with the expression she'd perfected over decades of disapproval. "So this is where you've been hiding," Elena said. "With a criminal in a foreign country." "Hello, Mother. It's lovely to see you too." Vespera closed the door, leaning against it. "How did you find me?" "Your sister finally called. She said you'd ruined her life and sent her to New Zealand." Elena's voice climbed with each word. "She said you're involved with organized crime. That you stood by while your fiancé was murdered. That you've become someone I wouldn't recognize. Xantha is in New Zealand because she helped Lysander steal $300,000 from me. And Lysander was killed by his own poor choices, not by me." Vespera kept her voice level. "If you came here to lecture me about morality, you can save your breath. I'm done apologizing for surviving." "Surviving?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "You call this surviving? You're playing house with a monster in a villa bought with blood money. I call this building something real from the ashes of what was stolen from me." Vespera moved to the window, looking out at the vineyard stretching toward the horizon. "Valerius Constantine is many things, but he's never pretended to be anything other than what he is. Unlike Lysander, who performed righteousness while robbing me blind. Unlike Xantha, who smiled to my face while fucking my fiancé. Unlike you, who's spent my entire life demanding I be perfect while offering nothing but criticism in return. How dare you?" "How dare I what?" "Tell the truth." Vespera turned, and something in her expression made her mother step back. "You called twice after I told you about the gala. Twice. You didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't offer support. You lectured me about reputation and asked when I was coming home. So forgive me if I don't particularly value your moral judgment right now." Elena's face flushed. "I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect your image of who you wanted me to be." Vespera's voice softened slightly. "I'm not that person anymore, Mom. Maybe I never was. I'm someone who makes wine in Tuscany with a partner who terrifies people. I'm someone who inherited millions from dismantling my ex-fiancé's life. I'm someone who listens to men die over the phone and chooses to stay anyway. If you can't accept that, then you should leave before the party starts. And if I stay, then you behave like a guest at your daughter's triumph. You smile. You drink the wine we made. You congratulate me on building something beautiful. And you keep your judgments to yourself. Vespera crossed her arms. Those are the terms. Take them or go. Elena looked at her daughter like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The Vespera who'd sought her mother's approval had died somewhere between the gala and this moment. The woman standing in the library was someone new, someone harder, sharper, more certain of her own worth. Does he make you happy? Elena asked finally. The question caught Vespera off guard. What? This man. Valerius. Does he make you happy? Vespera thought about morning tastings where Valerius deferred to her expertise. About late nights reviewing expansion plans where he challenged her assumptions but never dismissed her conclusions. About the way he'd held her while she cried over Lysander's death, offering comfort without absolution. About how he protected her fiercely while expecting her to be fierce in return. He makes me powerful, she said. And respected. And safe. Happy is complicated. But it's real. More real than anything I had before. Elena studied her daughter's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'll stay. For tonight, at least. We can discuss the rest later. There's nothing to discuss. This is my life now. I know. Elena's voice cracked slightly. That's what I'm trying to accept. The party was everything Vespera had orchestrated and more. The courtyard glowed with thousands of fairy lights strung through the olive trees. The quartet played Vivaldi as guests arrived in luxury cars, their jewelry catching the light like captured stars. Waiters circulated with their flagship wine, a 2023 Sangiovese that Giacomo had nearly wept over during the final blending. Vespera moved through the crowd with Valerius at her side, his hand occasionally settling at the small of her back, a casual gesture of possession that everyone noticed. She watched their reactions, the calculated respect, the careful deference, the understanding that she was no longer just a sommelier, but something more dangerous. The wine critic from Gambero Rosso cornered her near the fountain. Miss Caldwell, this vintage is extraordinary. The balance, the complexity, how did you achieve this in a single growing season? By refusing to accept anything less than exceptional. Vespera smiled, the expression sharp and satisfied. And by having partners who share that standard. Partners? The critic glanced at Valerius, who stood 20 feet away discussing something with an Italian senator. I heard Mr. Constantine knows very little about winemaking. He knows everything about excellence. The rest he leaves to people who've earned his trust. She sipped her own wine, letting the flavors speak for themselves. That's real power, knowing what you don't know and hiring people brilliant enough to fill those gaps. Later, as the party reached its peak, Vespera found herself on the terrace with her mother. Elena had been circulating carefully, saying little but observing everything. Now she stood looking out at the vineyard, a glass of Sangiovese in her hand. Your father would have loved this, she said quietly. The vineyard, the wine, the life you're building. Vespera's throat tightened. Her father had died when she was 16, too early to see what she'd become. You think so? He always said you had exquisite taste and a spine of steel. He just worried the world would break one before you could fully develop the other. Elena turned, and her eyes were wet. He was wrong. You developed both just fine. Mom, I don't understand your choices. I don't approve of the man you've chosen. But I can see that you're not broken. Elena reached out, tentatively touching Vespera's arm. You're not the daughter I expected. But maybe that's okay. Maybe I expected the wrong things. Before Vespera could respond, Valerius appeared at her elbow. Excuse the interruption, but the mayor of Florence just arrived. He's hoping to discuss next year's wine festival. Of course. Vespera squeezed her mother's hand once, then turned to follow Valerius. But she paused, looking back. Stay tonight. There's a guest room in the East Wing. We can have breakfast tomorrow. Just the two of us. Elena nodded, something like relief crossing her face. I'd like that. As midnight approached, Vespera and Valerius stood at the edge of the terrace watching the last guests depart. The party had been a triumph, orders placed, connections made, their reputation as vintners established beyond question. In the distance, the vineyard stretched toward the horizon, their empire written in vines and soil and determination. Do you miss it? Valerius asked. The life you thought you'd have? The simple dreams? Vespera leaned into his side, his arm coming around her shoulders with easy familiarity. Sometimes. Then I remember that those dreams were built on lies, and I was planning to be grateful for mediocrity. She looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd become her foundation. This is better. Harder, but better. We're going to build something magnificent here. His voice held absolute certainty. Something that lasts generations. Something people will remember long after we're gone. A legacy. A reign. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. You were meant for this, cara mia. Not the small life Lysander offered. Not the safe path your mother wanted. This power and wine and refusal to apologize for either. Vespera kissed him then, tasting vintage and victory and the future they were building from the ruins of her past. When they broke apart, the vineyard spread below them like a kingdom won through fire. A vintage reign, she said. I like the sound of that. Then let's make sure it's one worth toasting. Valerius raised his glass to the night sky, and Vespera raised hers to meet it. The crystal rang clear and true, a promise written in wine and starlight. They'd survived betrayal. They'd dismantled enemies. They'd built something beautiful from ashes and anger and refusal to be destroyed. And they were only getting started.